Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Take a Stab at It. I'm your host, John Hoyer, and with me is...
Jason Barge. And with us is no one.
Nope. Just it's solo boys today.
Me and you, like the good old days.
The good old days.
Like the glory days of the
couple
podcast.
Months ago.
It's what our fans demand.
We both can get a little silly because no one else is here that's more important than us. That
there's no bedtimes to accommodate. We're rocking and rolling tonight.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, let's just move on to it. What have you been watching, Jason?
All right. So I recently watched a movie from the 80s called Brain Damage. It's a horror film.
Oh, snap.
And I know you watched it too, John.
Yes.
And it's wild. And I gotta say, I kind of loved it. It's obviously, you would say, like an allegory for like drug use, right? That's pretty obvious. So there's this kind of blue, I guess, like eel snake looking creature that latches onto the back of people's necks and like inserts this like blue liquid into their brain. And then they get like this really euphoric high when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
The trade-off is this creature whose name is Elmer in the film can now control your body, and he feeds on human flesh. So he basically takes over your body, and you're now this murder vessel for him.
Oh, yeah.
To accommodate his need for human blood and flesh. And, you know, these characters get in so deep that they need this thing so bad. And it talks. I didn't mention that it talks. And so it just like it opens with this elderly couple who lost him. They like had him in the bathtub and he swam away or got away somehow. And then you see them, they both kind of relapse, I guess, or they go through withdrawal. They start like foaming at the mouth. And
it looks like they get older over the movie too, right?
Yeah. Well, they look all strung out and they just like got to find this Elmer creature, but
I think it's pronounced Almer.
Almer. Yeah, there was like a reason for that, right? It was like it
means something.
Yeah.
That's like, but no. So it is a wild movie, and like the special effects are in some ways like really great for the time, but also like weird in how like the eyes on it are just painted on eyes.
Yeah.
While it's like talking, it's very bizarre, but it's amazing.
They double down on how bizarre it is, though. They just commit to it. It's
so like most movies like this, you get like two big weird scenes kind of spread out over like 80 minutes. And this movie, it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. And I was texting Jason the whole time and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because I watched it first and I was like, please, you have to watch this so I'm not the only one that's seen it, so we can talk about it. It is wild. It's a trip, and you know, I think it succeeded in everything it set out to do. And you're right, it's like the production value, it's almost like, I don't know, there's something very creepy about the character and the way he talks. And like, so Almer has like conversations with the main dude. I forget his name, but he's the guy we follow in the film who becomes hooked on the blue juice and whatnot. And you know, they just have these conversations, and Almer's like, he's a little like patronizing sometimes, and just like,
the voice they got for him. They got like a radio personality, I believe.
Yeah.
So like he has this kind of like broadcaster kind of voice.
Yeah.
And like he seems like really smart and intelligent,
trustworthy. Like it's just like seems like he's the smartest guy in the room.
He's Elmer. Like, oh, don't worry about those killings. Here's some blue stuff.
Yeah, here's some blue stuff. And
it does seem like it's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of feel like this is like the logical extension of what a kid would be told about from like Dare or something.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's going to happen if you do any drugs. Like, there's this little blue guy that's going to get you. And your brain's going to be all messed up and then you won't be able to live. And it just seemed like kind of like the most extreme version of what like these scare tactics were like in the 80s.
Yeah, no, it would be a very effective PSA, I'm sure. But yeah, Brain Damage, check it out. And the guy, what's the director's name again? Frank Henenlotter, and he's got another one called Basket Case, which I guess he's probably more well known for that one. Or...
It seems like it. Yeah, I'm really excited to check that out.
Yeah, and there's 3 of them. So who knows?
We'll probably be talking about those later.
I'm sure at least the first one is good. I don't know about the other two, but stay tuned. John, what have you been watching?
All right. So to prepare for this this episode, I watched Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Lovely.
Did someone else on the podcast also watch this movie?
It's got to be me. It's no guests in the room. Yeah. Cat's out of the bag. I watched New Nightmare too.
Yeah, this is your first time, right?
Yeah, first time I saw it. And this is the only other one that Wes Craven actually directed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Of the Nightmare movies.
Of the Nightmares, correct. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I know we both have thoughts on it. I'll let you start.
Okay, so I enjoyed it a lot when I first saw it, and I was probably too young to be watching these types of movies, obviously, if you've listened to any other episode. But I remember being very impressed with like all the meta stuff. And now when I rewatched it, I guess because I've seen Scream, we've kind of had all this like meta commentary in other movies and stuff.
Okay.
It kind of wasn't as impressive to me this time around, but I will say I liked some of the thematic stuff in it. I did like the production value of how wild it gets towards the end, because it seems like it has a real budget this time.
Yeah, and they end up in like hell almost. It's like
it's like a very surrealist kind of.
At the end, are they hinting that Freddy is the devil himself? Because doesn't he turn into like a devil at the end? He gets like horns and stuff.
Yeah, they're kind of trying to get at this like idea of that these evil beings, the devil or whatever, like feed off of the fear of people.
Yeah.
And like that's how like why people enjoy horror movies, because it's like we watch these horror movies and we kind of get to expel these like demons of sorts.
Yeah.
And these creatures feed off of us. But like where it gets weird is that they're like, well, this thing is taking the form of Freddy and he likes Freddy. And now that Freddy is not being spoilers, Freddy is dead in like in the Nightmare series. So they're like, now he's like trying to come into the real world and scare people again because he's not getting it through like horror scares or something. But okay, so I enjoyed it overall. I have some issues with it though, which I will say is this. Okay, so there's a little kid in this. So the main character, Heather, I can't remember her last name, but she was the actress that was in the first Nightmare, and this is like her as an actress in the real world.
She's playing herself, and
so
this is post the success of the Nightmare movies, and they're trying to make another film. That's kind of the premise.
So she has a kid, and this kid takes up a lot of screen time. It's very weird that they decide that he should be having all these nightmares of Freddy attacking him or whatever. We never see it. We only see like Freddy kind of going after Heather, the mother. So it's like this weird like thing where we're in her story and we're kind of invested in her journey, but then it's always stopping to be like, oh, I gotta watch out for this kid. And at a certain point, I'm just like, fuck the kid. I don't care about the kid anymore. So New Nightmare, I overall enjoyed it, but
it's a nice segue into Scream.
Yeah,
for sure.
You got to hear me bitch a little. That's all. Let's move on to our review of Scream.
All right, so the synopsis of Scream. 1 year after the brutal murder of her mother, Sidney Prescott and her friends are targeted by the same ghost-faced, knife-wielding killer with a penchant for horror movie trivia. So I know this for you and I both, this one was kind of like a film of our childhood. Like before, a lot of films were films of your childhood, but I'm on board for this one. So, and it came out at like the right time. We would have been like, what, 8, 10?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I saw it right when it came out, but I was pretty young. You, I'm sure, saw it in theaters.
A booster seat. Hold on. I have something to admit to you.
What?
Okay. So when this movie came out, my mom rented it, but wouldn't let me watch it.
Okay. What is her criteria for what you can and can't watch as a youngster?
So usually anything when I was younger, if there's any sort of like sexual content, that was like a no-go.
Okay.
I mean, I say that as like, if people are like, oh, is your mom a prude? I'm like, well, I'm talking when I'm like 7 or 8. Like, I mean, it's pretty young for most of this. But so what she didn't like about this was that it wasn't necessarily the violence of it, but she hated like and was disturbed by the fact that these were like friends that were like killing each other and like they're, you know, basically torturing and like doing all this stuff. And they're supposed to be like, these are the people I like to hang out with, but I'm killing them, you know, like that sort of thing. So she was very disturbed by that concept. So much so that it blinded her to the fact that this was satirical in any way. So I didn't get to see it for a number of years until it was on TV. Then when I watched on TV, I was very, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but I was confused by like, I assumed it was very like aggressively dark or something. And when watching it, I was like, oh, this is like borderline a comedy.
Yeah.
And, you know, like there's a lot of meta stuff in it, et cetera, et cetera. But like, so when I first saw it, I was like almost like completely thrown off by like, well, this is the thing that she was upset about.
Did you get all the satire when you first watched it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it.
How old were you eventually?
Either like teens, somewhere in the teens probably. And I got it. I mean, I've seen like, you know, Halloween, Nightmare, Jason, all those guys. So I understood a lot of it, that there was tropes and stuff, but like I wasn't like super well versed in like the horror genre, but I got what it was going for, but also I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't like fuck me up the way.
Yeah. What you anticipated could never live up to what it actually was, because your mom kind of set it up as this really horrific film.
So years later, I think when the fourth one came out, I got a bunch of these on Blu-ray, and then I watched the first one, I think, again. I don't think I watched the second or more until like later than that. But I watched the first one again, and I did really like it. And it's just like such a weird movie because it's so 90s.
Yeah.
Like the cast is a very like who's who of like people that didn't really catch on really. I mean, like you got Skeet Ulrich and like Jamie Kennedy, like
it's so weird seeing him as like an actor. I just like only know him from like the Jamie Kennedy Experiment, and I like forget every time he pops up. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a reason he was on TV. He like had an acting career.
So we have all these like relics of like the 90s, like David Arquette. This is before he became a wrestler. Trevor's probably disappointed he can't talk about David Arquette's wrestling career.
Well, we had Courtney Cox. This was like peak Courtney Cox, like Friends and everything. She was probably like the biggest name. Well, was she the biggest name at the time?
I think David Arquette was actually, you know what? I think they like the cast list. I think they had it like alphabetical. That's how they. But I know like David Arquette and Courtney Cox were big names. Nev Campbell, I think, was too. It's interesting how like these are like big names now, but then like during the fourth film, it's like, oh, we haven't seen any of these people in so long. This is great to have them back.
Good to have them back. Yeah, that's all they're known for now. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I feel like if you told me to come up with a list of like 10 things that just remind me of the 90s or feel very 90s, I feel like the Scream films would make the list, maybe, or maybe be honorable mentions at least. But A New Nightmare kind of felt like Wes Craven hadn't arrived in the 90s yet.
Yeah.
It was like he's like, all right, this is just an extension of the 80s. And then 2 years later, it's like, okay, this is 90s. Like everything about this is a 90s film.
Well, I think a part of that also is that the writer of Scream, Kevin Williamson, so he did like, for those that don't know, he did like Dawson's Creek. So like a little backstory on that. So the movie was originally called Scary Movie, and that eventually changed to Scream. And then to confuse things even more, there was a movie called Scary Movie that came out a few years later.
A parody of something that's was a satire.
Yeah.
What would that have been called, do you think? Horror movie?
I don't know. Maybe. It is very absurd to have a parody movie that just does the same thing that the original did, but like dumber.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first Scary Movie, like the main thing they parody is Scream, right?
Yeah. So Kevin Williamson, he writes this script and he's able to sell it to Dimension for $400,000, which was pretty high at the time. And he did 2 plot outlines for 2 sequels. So like this movie is kind of like a planned trilogy of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to get Craven. Craven said no a bunch of times, apparently. And he was like, I just want to not do horror anymore. I don't like where the genre's gone. And yeah, and I mean, to his credit, 90s horror was not very good.
Was the original script written as a satire? Like, you think this is like perfect for him coming from New Nightmare?
There were like a lot of directors seemed interested, like Robert Rodriguez, Sam Raimi. There's some other people there. But like they all wanted to do it, but they wanted to make it as like a straight comedy.
Sam Raimi could have pulled it off, I think.
I would be very interested to see what he does with it. I don't know if it wouldn't have been the same movie at all, but it would have been fun. So
yeah. Drag Me to Hell's an underrated movie. I don't think that movie gets enough love.
Anyway, so Wes Craven, they bug him to do it. He's like, no, I kind of want to get away from horror now. And then I guess they got Drew Barrymore just to want to be a part of it. I don't know if it had anything to do with like the part was cast. But then they're like, Craven found out that Drew Barrymore, like a real actress, was going to be in it. And then he's like, well, this might be a little different than what I thought. Yes, I'll do it.
How insulting to every other actor he's ever worked with. Like, finally, a real actress.
I guess like the thing is that we don't really think about it as much, but like horror movies in like the 80s and stuff, it just wasn't as mainstream as like these other movies. Like it was a very more of a niche like genre that wasn't well respected.
Do you think maybe he thought like New Nightmare would go down as like his like career defining like legacy? Like that was his sign off. Like you could kind of see it as that. A little bit.
It's interesting because like recently I just watched this movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow and The People Under the Stairs. So those were both Wes Craven movies. Serpent and the Rainbow came out in 1987 and The People Under the Stairs I believe came out in 1992. So it was very close to when New Nightmare came out. Both those movies kind of get lumped in as horror movies, but they're really just thrillers.
Yeah.
And I think that's where his head was going, is being like making more like mainstream kind of thrillers. It kind of makes sense though, because I think the stuff that works the best with Scream is more of the thriller aspect of it than like, I don't know. I didn't really feel it. Like the scares of it were not as big for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was a little bit more, I mean, it's not trying to be as deathly serious as other horror movies. So it's a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah. And even as a child, I remember not being as scared of this as other films. And I recognized the comedy aspect of it, but not nearly as much as I do now as far as like the satire. Because when I was younger, I understood all the Halloween stuff and like the rules of horror. I like understood that was kind of playing into the cliches, but all the little references, were kind of over my head. But it's interesting. And we were talking about Drew Barrymore and, her being a draw for the film, but then she gets killed off 13 minutes in and she was kind of billed as like,
one of the main actresses. Yeah.
And do you think that in itself is like a homage to Psycho a little bit?
It has to be. It has to be. And it's really effective because the scene plays out. It doesn't feel like that scene doesn't feel like it's in a rush. Okay.
That to me is the scariest part of the film. This opening scene is like, and we were talking before the show, like, I feel like I've seen this movie, a handful of times, but I feel like I've seen this scene a dozen times. I don't know, on TV or what have you, but it's a great scene.
Oh yeah. So Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore, she gets a call from Ghostface. And what I like about the beginning of it though, is that her and him, they're both kind of flirting with each other at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it eventually kind of turns menacing as you'd expect. But I did think to myself, Ghostface, he's got some moves.
Yeah, he's a charmer.
Sure. Yeah. She's got a boyfriend and she first doesn't admit that, which is interesting. I guess when you're in high school, whether or not you have a boyfriend, girlfriend is pretty, up in the air with that. It's like, one week we do, 1 week we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
So-and-so didn't talk to me for a day, so we're broken up, I guess now. So they're talking. It gets a little bit, he gets a little pushy and nasty. She hangs up, he calls back a bunch, and she's like, "Oh, my boyfriend's going to be here soon. He's going to beat you up." And then of course, he's already got the boyfriend.
Yeah, he's already got the boyfriend. And so I like, that seems like that would be like, I remember like when first saw it, I thought she was just like saying that to like get him off his back, and then it just like cuts to him tied up. Oh, damn it! He's made quick work out of him. He is
a football player.
Yeah.
God damn it, Steve.
Steve. And we have to mention, she's getting quizzed on horror movies.
Yeah.
During these phone calls. There's some softball questions. The one she gets wrong was actually featured on our Halloween episode. The killer in Friday the 13th, which of course in the first one is Jason's mom, which she didn't know, and she died because of it.
I'm gonna say I think it was still a softball question.
Yes, she got it wrong though.
Well, I'm saying by 1990,
she thought it was a trick question. Under the circumstances, you can see why she answered the way she did.
Well, yeah, because she's like crying, like whatever. I don't know, like stop talking to me.
Well, it also made me think. Next game show, I need to come up with some harsher punishments because, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I definitely would try harder to beat Trevor then.
I just hire guys to like break into your house during the game show.
Yeah, no. So, all right. So we see old Stevie, he gets his guts pulled out of his stomach or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
She's not handling that well. So then he tries to quiz her some more, and she's not feeling it at that point. She's over it. And then he chases her around. And then what I like about this scene is how deranged it is, because it keeps like kind of upping the ante to where you don't expect it to go as big as it does.
Yeah.
So like you think, okay, he's going to break in, he's going to stab her, or she's going to get away or something. Like that'll be like the first scene. But it's like he breaks in, he chases after her, he starts choking her, and then it's like they make it even worse by having the parents come in, and she can see the parents.
Yeah.
And she's like, because he like crushed her throat or whatever, she can't yell for help.
Right.
And she like can see their faces as she's getting like murdered.
Yeah.
Oh, and then
it does seem like sometimes Ghostface kind of like just lets him go a little longer. Like there's several times he could have just like put an end to it, but he likes the chase. Yeah.
So the parents get home. Obviously, they're seeing the popcorn's on fire, and they can't find their daughter. So they go to pick up the phone, and they can hear their daughter like dying.
Yeah.
And, they open the door and they see her like strung up, like being hung or whatever.
I read that that's a nod to Suspiria a little bit. What do you think? I think it could be, but I don't know.
This is the thing with
somebody just hanging there is kind of, I don't know.
It's a little, well, I like that it's a little like, it's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
So I could see like Wes Craven be like, it's a weird thing. All right.
It is. That's one of the more shocking images of the film.
Yeah. I don't know. Cause like just Wes Craven, when I hear his like thought process on stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm on board. I get you. But if I don't hear like his impression of something, I will probably not come to the exact same conclusion he does of why he does something.
Yeah.
So when you say that makes sense to me, because that's not how I read it. But you saying Wes Craven was doing that, I go, okay,
yeah, we get it. But also, when I was a kid, I didn't understand like why her parents were there. Or like, I was like, are they visiting her? Like, I didn't understand that she still lived at home. Like, I didn't realize they were supposed to be high school kids.
Still lives at home.
No, like I thought they were supposed to be like adults because I was so young. Plus, they're played by adults.
Yeah, so, but like her boyfriend has a Letterman jacket and he's a football player.
I don't know. I thought it was college. I thought it was like a sorority house or something. I don't know.
I kind of like this idea of some guy that like still goes by like he's like 25 and still thinks of himself as a football player because he played in
mid varsity freshman year.
Could have gone pro.
Blew out my knee.
That's what happened. Okay, so the next scene we have is we got Sydney. She's in her room, and her boyfriend Billy comes in the window.
Wes Craven loves boys crawling in windows.
It's so
can't get enough of it. So, is this a movie trope, or did this happen does this happen in real life?
I
want to hear from our listeners on this one.
Yeah.
Like, what has anyone ever snuck in your window?
I get like it makes sense to me as a movie thing because it's a very easy way just to have a character come in without like going upstairs and like all this extra.
Well, they're sneaking in.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess as a 32-year-old man, I would just think that that's like unreasonable to expect of people to like sneak in, climb a house to go to like go into a window and stuff.
Sure, but high school you, if you were seeing a girl who wasn't allowed to have boys over, like was it ever a thought in your mind like I could go sneak in her window?
No.
There's always a trellis. There's got to be like a trellis you climb. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I would just think like just go in the backyard and then you could hang out or whatever. Because like I don't know, I just think it would be. Maybe it's just my parents are very lax, but like I feel like if I just went to the basement, I don't think my parents would have been like, "What are you doing?"
Well, nowadays it'd be like, well, dude, just like text me when you're downstairs. I'll let you in. It's always such a surprise in these pre-cell phone eras. They just like barge into the window.
All right, so Billy, he comes in through the window and he's telling Sydney, I kind of enjoyed this little like stretch of like
his little rating analogy.
Yeah. So he's like, okay, so I was watching The Exorcist on TV and they cut out all the good parts. And then I started feeling like that's our relationship. Basically, I guess he wants an NC-17 relationship. So yeah, he tells her that and she's like, I don't want to be doing this stuff now. She's still mourning her mother who was killed, which he does not act like is like, it's like a thing you overcome.
Yeah. And it's a year. It's coming up on a year.
So that's not even, especially
it's still
like,
pretty fresh.
Especially for like by kid standard. Yeah. So he's like, oh, come on, get over it. Let's do some naughty stuff. And she's like, no. So her dad, I think, tries to barge in at one point and, he gives some good exposition about he's going to be gone for a few days, which, that plays into a lot of the stuff that happens later.
Yeah.
The next day at school, we see all the press show up and it's like chaos. Okay.
Yeah. Word is out about Drew Barrymore's murder.
Yeah. Not a lot of people talk about Steve in that. For being the star football player that he is, no one gave a shit about Steve.
Poor Steve.
Hashtag justice for Steve.
We need a prequel with Steve.
Well, if there was a prequel, we would definitely know he's a douchebag that deserved it. So at the school, the cops are interviewing everyone. I believe they interview Sydney briefly, and they try to like let us know a little bit more about like she's been through a lot.
Yeah,
it's about a year now. But the part that I really love about it is that we get to find out the Fonz is the principal.
Yeah, I totally forgot about this until I rewatched it. I was pretty excited. Love Henry Winkler.
Oh my god. And they even have scenes where he's like playing with his hair in the mirror. And I thought he was gonna do like the Fonz like Henry Winkler is a delight.
What a treasure. Yeah.
So they interview Sydney and they let her go because obviously she didn't do it. But so then after that, we get to see her hang out with her group of friends and we get to meet Stu and Randy, who are quite the characters. They love talking about horror movies and relating like real life violence that happened to a friend, like a classmate of theirs with like horror stuff. I think it's funny that throughout the whole movie, everyone acts like anytime Ghostface is doing some shit, they think it's Randy fucking around. Randy, is this you? Fucking Randy. Jamie Kennedy experience, I guess.
I will say, like, there were definitely kids in high school that, like, that would be how they would cope with tragedy. They would just, like, talk like that, just relate it to movies or joke about it. And I don't know.
No, especially for people our age, it's like we had Columbine, 9/11, other tons of other stuff that occurred while we were, like, in school and whatnot. So You're right on that. I shouldn't be too judgmental, but it is kind of weird how like Stu insists when it's like Sydney's like clearly uncomfortable and the Billy, you know, obviously what a lovely person Billy is. Billy's like, hey man, that's not cool. Don't talk about our crimes in front of her. So yeah, so we get to meet them. They're talking about bullshit. Sydney gets upset, leaves, I believe. So later she gets a call from Tatum. Tatum's going to come over. And then she gets another call, and it's from Ghostface. It's an interesting scene because, like I just mentioned, she thinks it's Randy immediately.
Yeah.
And then she starts like kind of shit talking horror movies and like, oh, it's about like big breasted women who are poor actresses or whatever. And that like rather than go out the front door, they'll go up the stairs, you know, being chased. And that's literally what happens when Ghostface attacks her. She tries to open the front door. She had to just move the little latch thing or whatever, but I guess it was hard to do. So she just went up the steps. And so she gets attacked in her room and Killer can't get through. Then he like disappears, and then out of nowhere Billy shows up, but Billy drops his cell phone, so Billy gets arrested.
Billy's a little suspect.
That kid has such greasy hair throughout that whole movie. He looks like he just had a mask on with how greasy his hair
he's always sweating and just throwing the mask off. It makes sense. Also, like, how low of an opinion does Sydney have to have about Randy to just assume it's him? Like, a girl has just been brutally murdered and was called beforehand by some weirdo. So she's like, oh yeah, this sounds like Randy, like the day after he would do the same thing as a joke. Like, poor Randy. No love for Randy. He just loves movies.
He loves movies and loves Sydney. Those are his two passions. And for some reason, bring up the loving Sydney part kind of a lot in this movie for what seems to be a secret.
If anyone is justified in being the killer, it's probably Randy. Like, he's got the biggest. Like,
yeah, no, you're right.
Like, sounds about right. You guys were kind of mean to him.
I'm surprised they didn't try to make him the patsy in all this. Like, I feel like that would have been easier to do.
Yeah, well,
you wouldn't have to do anything with the father at all. It would be pretty easy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, they kind of made a patsy out of Billy for a little bit, a little misdirection there.
Which is weird that they would do that, because the risk on that is that there's nothing in his history that would line up with the previous murders at all that they would look at and be like, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So ballsy move on Billy's part. Outside, we get to meet Gail shows up trying to record stuff, and they're not quick enough, and everyone drives away. But and we also meet Tatum's brother Dewey, which was parodied later in Scary Movie as
Doofy.
Officer Doofy.
That is all I can think of when I see Dewey now. I'm not gonna lie. If there is one lasting impression of those Scary Movies, it's Doofy.
Doofy. Who would go by Dewey after the age of like 8? I also kind of enjoy that Tatum just berates him a lot in front of his other like colleagues.
Yeah. What doesn't he say? Something like, Dad says you have to respect me when I wear this uniform or something like that.
Which, like, why do you have to word it that way? So anyway, so at the police station, they're I guess they what do they say, like they can't get a hold of Sydney's father,
right?
And he's like not checked in at the hotel he said he was going to. So wonder where that's gonna go. So yeah, Sydney and Tatum go out the side door, the back door, or whatever, the police station. Gail shows up with a camera and she's like trying to interview Sydney. And then they trade some barbs back and forth about, I guess, what was it, Gail? She wrote a book, right?
Yeah. This is when we find out that Gail she was really close to the story of Sydney's mother being murdered, and is now, I guess you could say, trying to capitalize off of it by writing a book of her side of the story, which doesn't really line up with Sydney's, because there's this guy, Cotton Weary, played effortlessly by Liv Schreiber in the 8 seconds that he's in the film.
Yeah, he's only in a TV news program.
Yeah. So
I hope he got paid for that.
Yeah.
I hope he got some money.
Gale is not convinced that he is guilty, and Sydney's testimony is what landed him in jail, even though she's not totally convinced that he might be the killer at this point.
So this will come up in the next scene. But basically, they're talking back and forth, and I guess Gale says something like, I'll send you a copy. And then Sydney just decks her. That's so badass. I love it. Watching these Scream movies over again and just kind of getting into this world, I do think like Neve Campbell should be in more shit. Like, yeah, she's good. She's great.
She maybe got a little pigeonholed with 3 of these movies. I mean, they had to have taken up a lot of her time. They were pretty sequential. She's got to have some like at least duds sprinkled in between the Screams, though.
Probably.
Like, maybe she just had a bad agent or something.
I don't know. Well, it's like, I guess now because she's maybe like she's a little bit older, and that sometimes when like the roles you play or like you age out of those kind of roles, it's like,
yeah,
I haven't really looked at her filmography lately, so maybe we're stupid and she's on some like TV show that's really popular,
like that ran for like 10 seasons, and she has like Emmy awards.
It's like a Netflix series that's like not really geared towards like people in our age bracket or something.
Yeah.
We'll look very dumb. So she goes. So Sydney, she goes to Tatum's house, and wouldn't you know it, she gets a call from Ghostface telling her she fingered the wrong guy again. Which, that's got to sting a little extra to be like, you were wrong before and you're wrong now.
Yep.
God damn it. Ghostface, he did it again. So, and that, I think that's what kind of changes her thought process on the whole Cotton Weary aspect, that he was the killer last time.
Yeah.
The next morning, she goes and meets Gale Weathers about it and tries to get her actual opinion on whether or not she believes Cotton Weary to be innocent.
Right. Yeah. And, Gale, I guess, has had several conversations with Cotton. And while she was covering the story, she kind of got a sense that he is innocent, and Sydney is starting to feel that way as well. And Gale's an interesting character. Like, she's kind of at the beginning, she's this like really overbearing, like will do anything for the story type of reporter. But if I recall, like in the sequels, they try to make her a bit more like noble of a character. She has kind of like a little.
It's a weird thing. They keep like going back and forth with her, which is like they somehow keep resetting her like relationship with Dewey.
Yeah.
Each movie, it's like all of a sudden they're not really on great terms, and then they get on good terms over the course of the movie again.
Well, in their defense, will they, won't they relationships were huge in the 90s, and they had to play into that.
Well, the thing is, though, it's like they're playing like adults in like a movie that has teenagers, so they should be a little bit more stable than that. I don't know, but so then in the school, Sydney and Billy run into each other and they have a conversation, and I enjoy this because Billy is, for someone who has such great like plans for murder and mayhem, is kind of dumb and talking to Sydney and how he equates like, oh, well, aren't you over that already? Come on. Like, my mom ran away from us and I'm fine. And it's like, she's like, it's not the same thing. She's still alive.
I feel like they should have kind of reevaluated their relationship after, she may or may not have thought he was a murderer. The whole equating her mother's death to divorce. Like, I don't know. Sydney probably should have had some second thoughts.
Yeah, he's not a good boyfriend. She should probably, I mean, I don't know if Randy would be a good boyfriend, but at least it's a step up. He's not a killer. He just likes movies with killers.
Yeah. I think Randy would have been a very good boyfriend, or even John Depp's character. Bring him back from Nightmare. What was his name? I feel like there's a lot of similarities between his character in Nightmare and Billy.
Oh yeah. I can see that. They're not in the weenie category, but they're in.
Well, I don't think we ever officially dubbed his character as a weenie, but
no. Well, I'm saying like they're both like dipshits, but they're not. Yeah. They're not like, they haven't like transcended it to like into the weenie category.
Yeah, and they get like for whatever reason, like people can't stay mad at them and they just get like unlimited passes almost.
I just don't know how you would be like, I just had a fight with my girlfriend. She still kind of thinks I'm the killer, but I'm going to show up at that party and be like, oh, hey, what's up? So then we have Sydney. She's in the bathroom. Other nobodies that are in the bathroom are talking shit on her mom, and she's not cool with that. And then Ghostface is in there just hanging out on the toilet.
Yeah.
And attacks her. She runs out. It's such a weird scene because it feels like it's not really that necessary. But
right. There's not like a big ensuing chase, really. She kind of like gets by him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then
I think it's supposed to just function as a way of like, okay, we have this scene. We got Dewey and Gale. They're flirting. And then like the principal announces that like school is now canceled for the foreseeable future. And then we got Stu and he's like, you know what? Party time.
Yeah. The kids just like, they don't seem too concerned, or they don't care that the reason is because there's a killer on the loose. They're just like, early summer vacation. Let's have a party.
So, so then we have, I think there's a scene with Randy and Stu at the video store, and they talk back and forth about motives and whatnot. So, I mean, I don't know if you know this, Jason, but it's the millennium. Motives are incidental.
Yeah, so Randy's kind of the guy that like really helps the through line of the satire. He's kind of always the guy that chimes in with, you know, in a horror movie this would happen or that would happen, and a little later on he breaks down the rules, as we will see the rules for horror films.
Oh yeah, which aren't really that insightful actually.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. So eventually, so we get to the party, and that takes place maybe, I think the second half of the movie is mostly the party, which I think like by today's standards would not happen. Like you wouldn't have half the movie take place in one location.
Yeah.
Like this is very much a 90s thing that they would do. I'm not saying that's like good or bad. It's just not how they would, like, I could see a studio like stepping in and being like, you're not having the whole movie take place at that. Like they would try to do something where it'd be like some sort of party in the middle, some other stuff happens, then a party at the end or something. They try to separate it.
I think you kind of have enough happening around it that it kind of works. You know, you got the whole news van thing, and then, you know, Dewey and Gale like finding the car and falling in love in the process, and the poor principal gets killed, Henry Winkler, and he's just kind of an afterthought.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that.
He's an afterthought in our conversation as well.
Well, apparently that wasn't actually going to happen in the script, but I guess I don't know if it was the Weinsteins or somebody said something to Williamson and Craven that they're like, you know, like a half hour goes by where there's no murders, right? So you gotta add a murder. So I guess Williamson was into it because we kill off Henry Winkler, and then we have a reason for all these kids to leave later in the movie
because they want to go see his body, because his body is hanging on the goalposts.
Yeah,
kids are like, let's go see it. Well, it's the kids that he scolded earlier, so I guess it's like justice was served.
Well, they got expelled, and I don't know. I did not feel bad for them when Henry Winkler expelled them. He's a sweet man.
Well, he also has the interaction with Freddie the janitor, played by Wes Craven. Who?
Oh yeah.
Where's
I thought that was a little on the nose.
Yeah.
He calls him. Oh, sorry, Fred.
Sorry, Fred.
Yeah. Then he just like goes back to work.
What if they cut out an entire subplot of Fred the janitor, and that's the only scene that made it?
And like Wes Craven's like, no, I was born to play this role. Like, you've done other things, Wes. You don't need to do this.
Do you think they had to talk him out of like a dream scene? I bet they had to talk him out of a dream scene.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, so at the party, we got Dewey and Gale showing up. And in the movie, it just feels like very natural that they would all be there. It was like, well, all the characters are going to be at the party, including the much older adults. Like, Dewey, it kind of makes sense because his sister's there and he's close with Sydney. But Gale's is weirder. And it's not really remarked upon enough that it's super weird that some like newswoman is like, we're just hanging outside in case the murders happen.
I like how Dewey comes in and the first thing he does is take a beer from somebody who's like, hey, you're underage. Just kidding. Be careful getting home.
And Gail being kind of sleazy, she's like, all right, I'll put a camera in there.
Yeah.
And then
which it's like, it looks like a little like 8mm film camera or something, but it has a feed to the van.
Yeah. So Gail, she like goes back to the van and the guy's like, oh man, there's a 30-second delay. And it's like, oh, that will definitely be coming up later. If he's saying that now, oh man. Okay, so then we get to Tatum's unfortunate death scene where she's like, all right, let me get some beers. And she goes to the garage and she comes back and Ghostface is there and he like toys with her and she assumes it's Randy again. Fucking Randy.
What kind of past, besides just really liking horror movies, what kind of past does Randy have that everyone assumes he would do this? Is this very on brand for him?
Here's the thing. The only thing I can relate it to is Randy seems like a guy who makes jokes that maybe cross the line of like good taste. Right. So they're like, oh, maybe Randy would think it's funny to play a prank on me or whatever. And that's what it is. I don't know. As somebody who, I sometimes maybe, go too far with a joke or keep.
Well, yeah, you go too far with jokes. You certainly are not afraid to cross lines. You love movies. But if somebody just showed up dressed as like a serial killer, I wouldn't be like, John, cut it out. Like, I'd be like, what's going on? Who are you?
Well, also, me as a 32-year-old man. It wasn't like we were in high school or something. Like maybe you would think, oh, well, maybe he might do that then. I don't know. Kids are shitty.
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the dude. Like he just likes movies and talking about movies. And,
it's a hopeless romantic.
If he lived long enough, he would have had a podcast and, might have been our competition. I don't know. And then we would have hoped he died. So that way we could capitalize on that. Anyway, so she gets chased and I just think this death scene is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like she goes through the little doggy door. I want to know how powerful that motor is for that garage door opener.
And also, like, did he disable the sensors or something? Because like my garage door, if like a leaf blows in front of it, it just like, it won't go up. It'll just, it just stops,
Yeah.
She's here dangling and kicking her feet. And
I feel like it'd be really easy to fall out. Just like put your arm closer to your head and you're like, oh, I'm out.
Yeah. No, it is a very strong garage door, but at the end it sparks and smokes. So, it at least maxed.
It was a malfunction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So then we have lover boy Billy shows up and comes in. And then Stu's like, oh, maybe you need to talk it out upstairs. What up? He's like, oh, man, real subtle.
Well, in hindsight, that they're like, the partner killers, it's kind of like extra sleazy of them to like have this little arrangement.
They're like busting each other's balls about their next victims and stuff. Anyway, they go upstairs, they talk it out, and then you know what? They get to do some naughty things.
Sydney's ready. I don't know what convinced her. Like, was it just guilt of like her thinking?
I don't know. But like
maybe he was the killer.
He's like, you sure? I think.
Yeah. What's funny is after they're done, you realize she's still not convinced that he's not the killer.
Maybe she just wanted to get what she could out of him before she like, finds out. Like,
she's like,
okay.
By the way, you get one phone call in prison. Like, who'd you call? And he's like, you can't be serious. You still think it's me.
Well, it was like weird. Like he's like, my dad. And then he's like, yeah, but they said they called your dad. And he goes, yeah, because you didn't answer my call. The way he responded to that is very quick. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Did you feel like that was like was that a good bullshit line?
It seems fishy, but
yeah, it seems a little fishy.
It could have just been like misdirection. Like the whole movie kind of like, but at least before people start getting picked off, it makes it so that anybody could have really been a suspect. Like when Sydney gets the call at Tatum and Dewey's house, Dewey is conveniently in his room until like right after the phone call, he comes out. So it's like they kind of keep this, this kind of impression that anyone could be a suspect. And we come to find, like, shortly after this scene, Billy then gets stabbed by Ghostface, and we think he's dead.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, just because someone's dead, that isn't enough to mean that, you know, they're not still a suspect.
And I think before that we have, Randy talks to the crowd while they're watching Halloween. I kind of enjoy this bit where they have like that wide shot of everyone watching the movie. And he's like talking about stuff, and they're like saying something like, "What rules?" Then he gets up and he teaches the class, like, you don't know the rules?
So what are the rules, John?
All right, the rules. All right, no sex, no drinking or drugs.
Everyone cheers to that one. Yeah.
And never say "I'll be right back," which I like the capper to that, which is like, Stu gets up and he goes, "Does anyone want a beer?" "No, we're fine." It's like, "I'll be right back." Which is like, Stu is so cocky with all this stuff because he knows, he's like, you know what? Everyone thinks there's only one killer. I'm killer number 2.
Yeah.
If anyone's going to get caught, it's going to be Billy. Like, Stu,
he's more part-time.
Yeah.
Billy's more the
he's the
mastermind.
apprentice.
Yeah. He's interning for Billy.
So, I think, what was it? Yeah. So Dewey and Gale walk. They hear about some weird car. They go to check that out. They find that it's Sidney's father's car. So they're like, "Oh, we got to get back." And then we see all these people leaving the party because that's when they found out that the principal was being, you know, he was hung between the goalposts. So everyone's like, "Well, we got to check that out." Yeah. So then we see like Sidney and Billy, you know, they get attacked. Sidney jumps out the window. And what I think is probably my favorite part is when Randy is now watching Halloween by himself, and then they have the score going, and then the score is actually working for like the score of the movie we're watching.
Yeah.
And he's like, turn around. And like Ghostface is behind him.
Yeah.
And then you got, and now the 30-second delay is playing into the story where you have Sidney. She runs to the news van and she gets in, and then her and Kenny see that Randy is going to be killed. Kenny opens the van door and, oh shit, Ghostface is actually there.
Yeah.
and kills him. Sidney gets chased by him, and it gets a little bit complicated, but basically she runs away, but then for some reason you find her like coming back to the house again later. And when she gets back to the house, Dewey's there. Dewey's stabbed in the back. He drops. Okay, so then Sidney, she gets chased again, eventually goes back into the house and locks the door. And surprise, Billy's still alive. He comes down, makes quite an entrance, just falls down the steps.
That's pretty good commitment, though, to him like being injured still. He just like face plants down the stairs. But like, what's odd is like maybe 30 seconds later he reveals that it's fake blood.
Yeah.
So was it really worth it? Like, if you wanted to kind of keep the illusion going, I get it. But
well, he could have just walked down the stairs like he's hurt.
Yeah,
and
like
be like,
down.
Give me the gun. I'm going out there. I'll put an end to this. And then so he opens the door. Stu comes in and cat's out of the bag. Those two are the killers.
Stu and Billy.
And they fucking shoot Randy, man. Not cool.
Not cool.
What did Jamie Kennedy do to them? So I guess one of the things that was a debate with Kevin Williamson, Craven, and like Dimension Films was whether or not they should have like a real motive or not. So they split the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Billy has a motive that Sidney's mom was having sex with Billy's dad, and that's why the mom left.
Yeah.
And then Stu doesn't have a reason. He's just like, he's
peer
a
pressure.
follower.
He said peer pressure. Yeah.
Peer pressure. Matthew Lillard's really good in this, I think.
Yeah. He kind of like goes off the deep end a little bit at the end, and he's like, we see like the crazy side of him. Like, it's impressive that he can hold that in to an extent. Like, he's a weird dude. He's like your quirky friend in the friend group, but then he's a little off the reservation then at the end.
Mm-hmm. If I remember the sequence of events here, it's that they go to get the gun. And the father, they have the father all taped up or whatever. They're gonna pin it on him and make it look like he's the killer. Yeah. Which I don't know how that works, because they're just gonna notice, like, if you put duct tape on somebody and then take it off, like, it's gonna look like someone had duct tape on them or like something. Like, It's like, oh, it's weird. The killer looks like he was taped up.
That's true. Yeah. And he's all like,
Yeah. Or like he would definitely have like bruise marks or like marks on his arm. Yeah.
Because he's pretty tied up. That's true.
Yeah. So they've got some good ideas, but
they're also kind of banking on the law enforcement not being super competent.
That's true.
You would think at this point, like the feds just get involved. They're like, all right, Dewey, step aside.
They did make quick work out of Dewey. So I mean, they're maybe not that worried about it, but I guess the gun is like missing and Gail's got the gun now. She goes to shoot Billy, doesn't work. The safety's on and Billy just pushes her and knocks her out.
What's he say? He's like, I know something you don't or something regarding the gun. Safety.
Yeah. So then what's interesting next is we finally get a reversal where Sidney runs off.
Well, even before all this, we realize in order for Billy and Stu to really sell this, they have to make it look like they're victims as well. So they kind of just start stabbing each other.
Oh my God.
Like that's kind of their thing. And Billy really goes for it. Like they've planned out where they're going to stab it, but he kind of goes a little deep and cuts up Stu a good bit.
Poor Stu. And Stu the follower,
and then Billy gets like one little stab.
Yeah, I gotta say that scene where they're stabbing each other. Every time I watch the movie, I always feel like that's like probably the most disturbing out of any of the scenes because it's like they want to survive and they want to sell this kind of thing, and they're doing it to each other, and they both seem to kind of enjoy doing it.
Yeah,
so it's very.
There's something very maniacal about it. And it's they just both kind of just seem so crazy at that point.
Yeah. So anyway, they get distracted by Gail and then Sidney's hiding and now she's making the phone calls and they don't know where she is.
Yeah, she ran off with her dad. And then they have the little voice box thing that they've been using on the phone. And so now she's toying with them a bit.
I enjoy that like Billy has no time for it. He doesn't want to play the game, so he just hands the phone to Stu, who's like crying about he's
bleeding out because Billy stabbed him. He's like, I think I'm dying, dude.
What a piece of shit. And Billy's just yelling bitch a bunch of times. Bitch. So Sidney like jumps out and she's wearing like the costume and everything, and then she uses an umbrella to impale Billy. And then in a way cooler death, she throws the TV onto Stu's head.
Yeah.
During the
closet scene from Halloween,
which as we know in that scene, that's when she fights back and stabs Michael.
Yeah.
We're like almost like passing of the torch from one Scream Queen to the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I like that. So then, was it Billy wakes up again? Gail shoots Billy. And then Gail, Sidney, and Randy are all standing up now, and they walk closer to look at Billy. And then Randy's like, oh, this is the part where he'll like wake up one last time.
Yeah.
And then somehow Sidney got the gun again and then just shoots Billy right in the head when he wakes up.
He like sits up.
So, and then I think after that, all that's left was that they have like Gail does like a little report outside the house or something.
You can tell that they had 3 films planned for this because the whole Cotton Weary subplot is pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And they make no attempt to really wrap that up in this film.
Nope.
And
then they have kind of, and I believe, right, the third one is more about like the backstory of the mother when she's like in Hollywood or something.
Yeah.
Right. I think like for me, I don't know how you feel, but like for like those movies, I would say I really liked the first one probably the most. Then 4 and 2, I think are close for me. But the third one, I felt like is the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, I think the third one is supposed to not be the greatest of the series. I don't know if I ever saw all of 4, but that's the one that starts where it's like 5 fake intros of all the stab movies. I did like that.
So at this point in our series, we've seen Peeping Tom, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street. So we now have slasher movies that are now referencing horror movies. Like there are horror movies in slasher movies now, you know?
Yeah.
So Nightmare on Elm Street is a movie within the universe of Scream.
Right.
And it is interesting because then we get to see like the filmmakers kind of play with the tropes and the genre a bit. And I think it's an interesting development.
Yeah. And I think the tropes around this point were so used that it was almost like, well, if you draw attention to them yourself as a filmmaker, then no one else is going to call you out for it because like you know, and you're letting the audience know that you know, and you know you're it's an homage to these previous films. And what I find interesting about this one in comparison to the other slashers is the whodunit aspect. And that's something we haven't really had quite yet. You kind of thought it was going that way in Black Christmas, but you know, as we know, that one ended, you don't know who the killer is or the motive. And the other thing that Wes Craven kind of shakes up a little bit in this one is the fact that there's two killers. And, you know, like we said, one has a motive, one doesn't. So I think kind of, even though he was doing this as a satire, he did kind of want to flip that on its head a little bit. And, you know, it is pretty surprising that there are two people that are working together that are both this demented that they're able to pull this off.
And they end up being like really good friends.
Yeah.
The way I like to talk about kind of this kind of idea of something that is satirical, but also like it's good at doing the genre that it's satirizing. I like to think of like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz as like movies that are first they're comedies, but also the filmmaking and the way that those movies are put together are actually great additions to the genres that they're satirizing.
And they clearly love the genre too.
Oh yeah. And they're very, very clever. And like, if someone was to say, oh, Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite zombie movies, you're not going to like look at them like, what are you, an idiot? Like, it's like, oh, of course it's a great movie. You know, it's a great. So I like with Scream, it has that satire. There are like, comedic moments, clever moments and all that. It's very playful, but also that it does take this stuff seriously enough that it is like thrilling and enjoyable to watch as it's like a thing separate from it being a satire.
Right. And it really solidified its place in the genre. You know, it's an essential film at this point, and it kind of paved the way for future films to kind of play into these tropes and these cliches, but still do it in kind of clever ways that still respects the genre, and it's still part of that genre. Like you said, if you said that Shaun of the Dead is your favorite zombie movie, like cool. But if you said like Scary Movie is my favorite horror movie, like no, that one's just like making fun of it. You know, like, it's
no, stupid.
Yeah.
That's such a weird line, I think. And it's difficult to walk that line. I think it's much more difficult than people probably give it credit for. I mean, Scream, I'm also thinking of other stuff too, but I don't know. I keep going to Edgar Wright and Shaun of the Dead, but like,
I think like a recent one, Cabin in the Woods is a really good example of something that played into cliches and drew attention to them, but was still a very effective horror film in its own right.
And I think with most of these, it's always like the third act is so important because the third act is kind of where this is the point where you have to deliver the goods.
Right.
And I think in all three of those ones we just mentioned, like the third act, I mean, you could argue other stuff, moments you like a lot more, but those third acts are like memorable and enjoyable. And
it's almost like, okay, you had your fun. Now bring something to the table. Like bring something a little new. Put a spin on something.
Yeah.
Keep it fresh.
Exactly.
You gotta earn it a little bit.
Yeah. With where this series is going, we're now kind of gonna be going into and seeing more films that are indebted to and inspired by like these other, classic films.
Yeah.
And for me, I thought the interesting jumping off point is you have to go Nightmare on Elm Street to Scream, because it's like you have the same director giving a different perspective when it's like, okay, Nightmare on Elm Street, classic slasher. And then he's like, okay, he's coming back. He's reinventing the genre. You kind of have like this hip new way of these films, and it's kind of, I assume people are also being inspired somewhat by like Tarantino and like Pulp Fiction being kind of, messing everything up for like all indie movies for the rest of like the 90s. Everyone wants to make like a Tarantino ripoff that's like self-referent, that's like references other movies and whatever. It's postmodern.
Yeah.
It's just weird because it's like 90s horror is like not really that great.
Yeah.
Then you have Scream, and then the rest of the 90s you get like Scream knockoffs. Like it's not as unique. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legends, like shit like that.
I think the 70s and 80s just became so oversaturated, and that's probably a reason that Wes Craven wanted to like mix it up a little bit, as he got like so sick of this. And he also they reference it in at the beginning of Scream, how Drew Barrymore's character like talks about how like the Nightmare sequel sucked. So I think he was kind of himself pretty drained.
Yeah. So I gotta ask the question, Jason. Would you survive this killer?
I would. For starters, I don't pick up any numbers I don't recognize. So I don't think the conversation would have even started.
Oh, yeah.
I would have sent it to voicemail, or maybe my voicemail would have been full, or like it would have sent to voicemail, but like the beta like transcription wouldn't have been able to pick up the voice recorder. So it'd just be like, I don't know. I would think it's like somebody called me about my car's extended warranty or something. So yeah, I think I would survive. I'm pretty confident in this one. Both killers also seem pretty clumsy.
This is where I would go with it. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of like his running, or their running, I guess, is like kind of silly. Like in contrast to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when he ran, it was horrifying. Because that huge man with a chainsaw being able to run that fast, that's really scary.
And you have like the smoke kind of billowing out behind him as he's running. Like
yeah, exactly. No, I feel pretty safe about this one. I think I'm surviving. What about you?
Well, a lot of the times Sydney and others, like they best Ghostface a few times where like they hit him with something, he falls back and he's down for the count for a little bit as they're like trying to run away. I would feel like, I don't know if I'm like the strongest man out there, but I feel like I could like one-on-one, I think I could like take him down. I don't know. If I'm running and he's chasing after me, I'm done. So I can't do that. So I have to stand strong, you know, and like fight him.
Yeah.
Maybe sit on him. I don't know.
Here's what I think you would do.
Okay.
I think you would resort to psychological warfare, and you would point out that what they're doing is a little cliche and try to get under their skin, and they would just get really annoyed.
No, it's not.
It's not cliche. It's a little cliche.
A little. Can you come up with a better way to kill me?
You're like, a knife, really? Why don't you try this pizza slicer?
Have you ever used a knife before?
Just give me the thing. Let me show you, and then you stab him.
Here. I don't know if I'd be that clever, but I mean, I'm thinking about this as like they're like 17-year-olds trying to kill me, and I feel like I could just give a good like punch to the face or a kick, and they're down.
I thought you were gonna say wedgie. It's always the wedgies with you.
I was thinking of like Observe and Report, where
that's the same one where he just like shoots the streaker, right? Is that
which is like, I saw that in theaters, and when the blood just splatters all over, and apparently no one else in the theater realized that was supposed to be funny except me. So everyone stared at me that like I was like disturbing that I would laugh at that. And I was like, no, that's the funniest part of the whole movie. Yeah.
The whole scene is ridiculous because it's so long. There's nudity and it's slow motion, and then just
slow-mo nudity of like balls bouncing up and down. And then they treat him like a hero because he just fucking destroyed this like man with his giant gun. Anyway, yeah, I'll overpower the guy, or I'll mock him into.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I might get stabbed a little bit, but if, you know, with my size and everything, I kind of feel like if he gets me anywhere in the front, I can absorb that. Like it's not hitting anything vital. So
yeah,
that's my vote. So. All right. Well,
this was a fun episode. I love our guests dearly, but it's been a while since it's been just me and you. Kind of
the Stab Boys.
Yeah, I kind of feel like an unaccompanied minor. Like my mom just dropped me off at the mall with you, and she's gonna come back later.
We got the vibe, man.
Yeah,
it's cool. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And next week, we will be reviewing Behind the Mask. Until then,
stab you later.
All right, let's move on to our review of, I was about to say Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, why not? Let's just do it again. See if this one's better.
Fuck you, Trevor. He's such a sweet guy. I don't know why. I'm so mean to him. All right.